welcome Meghan back to the podcast. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you. So good to be back.
Looking forward to seeing you in just a few weeks at Coastal Magic, too.
I know. I can't wait. First of all, warm weather, and then great people, great books. It's going to be amazing.
And a beach.
And a beach. Yes. Beach.
So you're gearing up right now for book 3 in your Starfig Investigations series.
I am indeed. Yes.
Tell everybody what that series is about.
Okay, so Starfig is kind of an odd series in that when people say, so what genre is it? I'm like, well, it's comic and it's fantasy romance and it's got a PI for the main person though. So it draws on a little of everything. It's really, I call it mischief, magic, and murder. It's got all those elements. You're going to have dead bodies, you're going to have comedy, and you're going to have some magic thrown in. And it's really meant to be adventuresome and lighthearted, but yet have some real issues in it too. So it's a fun series to write.
When you say real issues, what are we looking at there? Well,
the backstory for Quinn, who's the main love interest for Twig Starfig, is he's a human who's in a realm that they don't allow humans without magic, and he doesn't have magic, and so he's basically brought in as a slave. And the first book is really about his journey, also, and Twig's journey together, and becoming, they call him an indentured servant, but in reality, he has no rights. And Twig having to make some pretty hard decisions about the path his life is going and about stepping in for Quinn, and also Quinn being able to advocate for himself. So even though there's this lighthearted element to it, there's some, hard backstory, and you're not seeing it. I'm not showing it on the page, but it's there. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of hierarchy. These are not egalitarian societies, and you see that. But you see it in a way that is lighthearted and funny at the same time, and you see hope, because I like to write about hope and the idea that things can change.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it must have been fun to build the world as you prepared to write.
So I'm a pantser.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I didn't actually know what the world looked like until I started writing it. And what I do is I use Scrivener as my playbook for after the fact. And so once I wrote the first book, I started putting stuff in like, oh, and this happened, and this happened. Oh, I guess, well, this is something for this part of the world. And I do that with each book I write. I have to add in elements. So, and then going forward, know that those elements are there. So yeah, it was kind of a surprise for me, but I figure if I'm surprised, the reader will be surprised.
Sure. Yeah. And I've heard other writers, go down that path too, even with mysteries, for example. Like if I don't know who the killer is yet, my reader's not going to figure it out either.
Right. Well, that's how I do it. And I'm trying to learn to be a little bit more of a plotter, at least with certain spots, so that I can keep me moving forward at times. Because sometimes I write myself into a corner and I'm like, well, what do I do now? And I was like, I don't have a plan, right? So I am working a little bit on taking pieces and trying to plot a little bit, but really I'm a pantser at heart. So yeah, the world building was interesting that way, because it was like, oh, I would realize something partway through and be like, well, this is how this works. And there were different pieces that I wasn't sure how they worked until the second book, or now the third book, that suddenly things that I put in and didn't think much about, now I understand why.
Mm-hmm. Have you hit a point where it's like, oh, wish I hadn't have done that?
Yeah, I think even when you plot, I think there's probably a few of those moments where you get further into a series where you go, oh, it would have been so much more useful if I'd done this, And there are a few of those moments for sure where I felt like, oh, because you know what I would have done? but I haven't had too many of those. So I've been fairly fortunate.
That's good.
I like the world. Yeah, I like the world I've created. I like the guys I've created. I like the sidekicks and the people who come out, and I'm pretty happy with it as a whole.
Mm-hmm. And tell us, what can readers expect in the new book, His Fairy Share?
Okay, so the first book is basically the classic fantasy trope, but it takes everything and makes fun of it and kind of turns it on its head in a very loving way. Because I love fantasy, but there are tropes just like there are in romance. The second one follows much more of a PI trope. So it's the case that they get and they have to go on and they're trying to solve this case. The third one, though, is where Quinn, because of his past, really has to go home and deal with it. And part of him, he's established this life that he really loves. And so part of him is like, well, how bad can it be, to go home and do this? And they always ask that, well, how bad can it be? And as soon as one of them says that, it's going to be really, really bad. And that's one of those things I love to use in like, what could possibly go wrong?
Everything.
Everything goes wrong. And so this is the book about that. And it's really, the other two books are told from Twig Starfig's perspective only. So Quinn, and you get to know him as the love interest of Twig, but this is his book. And this is the reason it's taken me so long to write it, because Twig is a very easy character. He's half dragon, half fairy. He's a lot of id. He doesn't sit there and angst over a decision he makes. He makes a decision. He doesn't feel a lot of guilt or other things. He's very much the dragon. He's like, well, they needed to be eaten,
Mm-hmm.
There you go. And Quinn is very human, and he has undergone some trauma. And so he has a much more complex, let's say, way of looking at the world. And so that's a much harder voice to write. And especially to keep it in the same vein where it doesn't get so bogged down, because even though he has had these things happen, these stories are fun. I mean, they're meant to be funny. They aren't meant to be like, oh my God, they really are meant to be quite humorous. And so I had to then figure out, well, how is he grappling with this very hard thing? And yet there's still going to be these elements of humor in it, even as he takes on his past. So it's been a much more challenging book for me to write than the other two. And I don't know what the final tally is going to be, but it's probably going to be about 120,000 words. And just to give you a sense, my last one was 100,000.
Okay.
So, it's significantly longer, but it really needed the space. And but the more that I'm in, like I said, I just finished. I have about 3 or 4 paragraphs left before I can really write the end on it. And I'm going to be so happy. but I've already decided, like you go to that kind of cycle with your books, like, oh my God, I hate this book. Oh my God, everyone's going to hate this book, to kind of coming back around and seeing what you have. And I think this is going to be one that I feel very proud of in the end.
Mm-hmm. And that's always the best feeling, is when you pivot back around that corner to like, hey, this book.
Thank God for that corner.
Right. Do you have a release date in mind yet, as you're, still working to put the final paragraphs in?
Every time I try to give one, I'm so far off that it's been pathetic, but I am really almost done with this. If I'm fortunate in my editors and my own editing is able to if I'm able to get it together, what I'll try to do is print a few copies for Coastal, but I won't have the official release date until probably right after.
Okay. So the book probably in March, but those going to Coastal might get a little sneak peek, maybe.
I'm crossing my fingers there. We'll see. I'm always amazed when someone says, like, they'll write on Facebook, I finished the book today. I finished the book today, the first draft. Woo! Edits next. And like 3 days later, they're like, okay, so the release date's next week. I've finished with the edits. And I'm like, oh my God, what does your first draft look like? Because my first draft is not able to be that thing.
Yeah, mine either. Mine needs at least another month usually.
I know. Well, that's the thing. So, but this one it's the only thing I'm focusing on right now. So once I'm done with it, it goes out I have a whole series of editors who look at it for different areas, and then I'll also be going over it. So I'm hoping, but the real thing is Amazon and how fast they'll be willing to print copies and send them for me.
Right. So we'll see. Coastal may have books. Otherwise, March.
Otherwise, March.
What more do you have planned for Starfig going forward?
So far in my head, I have 8 books, which is funny for a pantser because you think I wouldn't know that.
Well, I was going to ask how that connects to being a pantser. So
yeah, because once you start something as a pantser, threads start taking off, and you start just following them, but you realize that's the weird thing about being a pantser, is that you really actually have direction. You just don't know it when you start. But as you go along, you really start to see it come together. And so I know that book 4, I've already started. I've already written part of, because again, I'm back in Twig's voice, super easy for me. I get him very well. And again, it's going to be his. Book 5 is probably actually going to be Bill's story, which is his side character, who everyone keeps writing me and being, is Bill going to get a story? Yes, he's going to get a story. Book 6, I'll go back to Twig. 7, I'm not going to say yet because I've got some ideas for. And then 8 will probably be the final. in there. And I had no clue other than that it'll be in Twig's voice. I don't know what that one's about yet. The threads are not there yet for that one, but they are through book 5 at least.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, this series essentially came from your love of fantasy.
It did.
What authors or books heavily influenced you as you started to create Starfig?
So the person who is absolutely most influential was Robert Asprin and his Mything Inc. series, because mine are based on puns too. So he'll have myth conceptions. Well, mine is, by fairy means or foul, which is by fair means or foul. Be fairy game, be fair game. And this one, his fairy share. Well, it's his fair share. And so, all of them are plays on words. Robert Asprin was also very tongue-in-cheek with fantasy. He understood that it's a lovely, genre to write in, but you can have some fun with it. You don't have to have everything just so, or you can, but you can make fun of it while doing it. So for example, Quinn is the first wizard in 1,000 years. That's such a trope in fantasy, that the wizard emerges and all of this, right? And so things like that where I could play with it though, because of course it doesn't ever go as the way you expect it to be. And so, yeah, Robert Asprin's my big one. I used to read a lot of Piers Anthony too, who's also humorous, but I also was hugely impacted by Anne McCaffrey. I loved Madeleine Engle's work. Wrinkle in Time was wow, they could have a female protagonist, as was the Pern series. I was wow, there can be a female protagonist. So that was great as well. But this one, it's really an homage and a love letter to Robert Asprin, probably, if I had to pick one person.
Nice. Very cool. What else do you have going on in 2020? More Starfig with 4, or are you going to look
Definitely.
at some other works?
I owe it to my fans, because usually I put out for the Starfig ones, I put out about 1 a year, and I didn't put one out last year. So I will get 2 this year to make that up to them, because they've been very patient and kind. Considering that. So I'll do that for sure. I'll try to get book 4 out. I also have a short story that's between book 3 and 4 that I'm going to do my best to get out this year. I have a couple other ideas that are kind of, again, comic, fantasy, more paranormal, I guess I would call them, 2 of them that I'm thinking about. So we'll see where those go this year. And I'm also talking to a person who in MM who I really adore, and we're talking about possibly doing a collaboration, and that one would, if we do, would be more, it would still have the murder for sure. I have to have dead bodies. They just show up in my and any of my romance is oh my god, there's a dead body, where did that come from? Well,
surprise.
Surprise. But so this would be probably a 3-book series starting, and it would be with definitely be more of a murder kind of romantic suspense, I guess you'd call it. But we'll have to see if that works out, and if we're compatible and all of that, because we just don't quite know yet. But we're going to talk about it at least. So I'm excited about that, because I've never collaborated with an author before in that way.
Yeah. I was going to ask if you've done collaborations, so that I'll be interested to hear how that goes if you move forward with it, because I find collaborating to be fascinating, and always talking about it is fascinating because everybody approaches it differently.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and I've talked to him about it a bit, and I'm a pantser, so I'd probably drive him crazy, but we'll see how that goes. You never know, and we'll see. If our styles are quite different, but that's kind of what I liked about us, is that we could kind of mesh in an interesting way, possibly. So we'll see.
Can't wait to see how that comes about, because I also love a good romantic suspense. So.
I do too. So, and I haven't written in one of those in a long time.
So you're headed to the beach, as we mentioned at the top of the interview.
Yeah.
You went to Coastal last year as a reader.
Yes.
What did you think of the weekend, and how would you describe it to others who might be headed there as a reader?
I loved it. I really did. In part because the focus has so much more on the fantasy elements. I mean, not everyone's a fantasy writer by a long stretch, but the majority have at least written fantasy, whether it's paranormal, urban fantasy, and all of it has to do with romance. And then you get the MF crowd and you get the MM crowd. And so you meet a lot of new authors, but also readers. And a lot of the readers have shown a remarkable, the MF readers have said, sure, I'll try one, I'll try an MM, why not, and we've ended up with a lot of new MM readers that way. So I think it's been a great, and it's smaller than something like GRL, and the pace is a lot more relaxed. And so I liked going as a reader. I did that with GRL the first time too, because I
Mm.
wanted to see what the pacing was like and what was expected. But Coastal, I just had such a good time. And there's the beach. I mean, there's the beach.
Literally right outside your door.
Yeah. So literally you get a cup of coffee, you're like, okay, well, in between panels, I think I'm going to go for a walk on the beach. So that was great.
What was your favorite part from last year as you were there, getting to take it in as the reader?
There's a bunch of things. I actually really liked the comedy panel last year. It had Lucy Lennox on it. It had Charlie Crochet on it, and it was really a fun panel. They bantered well, and they really talked a lot about why comedy, and of course that's my bread and butter too. It's for whatever reason I tend to. It's not that I can't write a serious piece. I can, but I migrate toward comedy. For me, that's my peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
That thing you could always do and always have.
Yeah. And it's funny because, for some people suspense comes easily or the internal angst. I don't do internal angst well. It's not my strength. But for me, comedy does. I can come up with something, a funny situation, and something can go terribly wrong. I can always make something go terribly wrong.
How bad can it get?
Yes. Can I make it worse?
And, as you're putting on the author hat this year, what are you looking forward to as you move into that role at Coastal?
I don't know quite. I mean, there's going to be a lot of new things this year. They're doing a fun ice cream social. I'm participating in, there's going to be a group of us who do basically paranormal Cards Against Humanity, where we're making our cards. And so that should be really fun. And, I love seeing the crowd who comes because I think I know almost every last one of them now. And so that's really always great because it's seeing family at that point. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean, there's just a lot of great engagement that goes on there. And I'm an extrovert. So for me, it's not so much the things as just getting a chance to spend time with people.
Awesome. Well, we're definitely looking forward to seeing you there in just a month.
Yeah. What are you looking forward to?
Last year was our first as well. And I really liked that smaller aspect of it. Because GRL, it's only a few hundred people, but it can feel big and like hustle and bustle. And I got to relax more at Coastal. I could appreciate sitting in on a panel. I could appreciate just having a moment, having a conversation in the hall without feeling like I had to get somewhere quickly for the next thing. And so that more relaxed atmosphere I really liked. And getting to meet authors who I don't see ever because, that crisscross and that networking with authors who are not solely focused.
Yeah, that's really nice too. I do enjoy, like I said, I enjoy meeting new people anyway.
Yeah.
So that's a great opportunity. But I think you just hit it. I mean, I think for people who are really overwhelmed at the idea of something like GRL, Coastal is a great place to start and to continue because it's so relaxed and you don't feel overwhelmed. And there's just times at GRL where I love it. I mean, I absolutely adore it. That's my conference every year. But I will say that it is to the point, you can't see everyone. I'll be like, hi, Jeff, how are you? So let me give you a hug. It's great to see you. How are you doing? And that's maybe be our whole exchange that whole week, because there's so much going on there. And I feel like at Coastal, it's so much easier to be like, you're going to grab a cup of coffee. Like, let's sit down and, can we have a talk? Hey, which panel are you going to next? Let's go sit together. It's just so much more where I get that engagement with people. And I do really love that.
And I think Coastal, for people who are perhaps hesitating to go to an event, Coastal could be a good gateway because it's like, oh, I handled that.
Yes.
Now maybe GRL or maybe, book lovers or maybe whatever that other thing is.
Well, and Jen and her crew are great. I mean, they really try to make everyone comfortable and have a great time. And, they really, they go above and beyond. So as do the organizers for GRL. But I really appreciate Jen and she does such good work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. So how can people keep up with you online, keep up with when His Fairy Share comes out and everything else you're looking at for 2020?
Yeah, well, the easiest way is either through my website, which is just www.meghanmaslow.com, or they can, find me on Facebook. I actually am starting a Facebook group with the launch of this book. So many people are like, why aren't you doing a Facebook group? Oh, you have to be there every single day. I'm trying to, not be on Facebook quite as much. But I am going to actually launch my group along with it. But for now, I just have a regular Facebook account that people can find me easily. And I try not to be on Twitter, frankly.
That's a good mindset to be in. Stay away from Twitter because it can be a lot.
I'll never write again.
So we will link up to all those things in the show notes so that people can easily get to them and to your books. And look forward to seeing you at Coastal next month.
Yes, I am so excited for this. And it'll be great to see you guys. And like I said, we should sit down and have a cup of coffee.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, no problem. And thanks for having me again.